On November 23, 1972, on Thanksgiving Day, the Hollis family was supposed to gather around the festive table. Ronald, Shirley, and their 16-year-old son Randy were already at home, waiting only for the youngest member of the family, Terry Lynn. The girl went cycling around 3 p.m., but for some reason, she didn't hurry back. As it began to get dark outside, the parents' concern only grew. Losing all patience, they soon dialed 911 and reported the disappearance of their 11-year-old child. Until that day, Terry Lynn had never caused any problems for her parents. She was a good student, disciplined, had many friends, and didn't stay out late. The Hollis family was well off, so there couldn't have been any talk of voluntary running away. The police of Torrance, California, who arrived after the call around 10 in the evening, immediately dismissed this version and recognized that they were considering this case primarily as related to criminal activity. The entire police force was alerted and directed to search for Terry. At the same time, friends and classmates of the girl were interviewed, who might provide any information about her possible whereabouts. Law enforcement officers and volunteers searched all night, literally looking under every bush, but failed to achieve any results. Neither the girl nor her bicycle could be found. By morning, the whole city knew about Terry Lynn's disappearance. Still hoping to find the child alive, the police announced her characteristics, description of clothing, and bicycle. They also asked witnesses who might have seen the girl after 3 p.m. and those who were with her at that time to come forward. Barely awake residents of Torrance were just digesting the information about Terry's disappearance when at 10:15 a.m., the news thundered. The search was called off. At dawn, 100 kilometers from Torrance, two men decided to spend their leisure time fishing. However, they were unable to do so. Just as they descended to the shoreline, they discovered the body of a child lying on a rock. It was a fair-haired girl, wearing only a white t-shirt. Instantly forgetting about their plans, the fishermen called the police to the scene. The forensic expert who examined the remains concluded that the girl had been subjected to abuse and was strangled. On the rocky coast, the body likely ended up due to transport. The victim's age was determined to be 10 to 13 years old. The identity of the deceased needed to be established as quickly as possible, so the characteristics described by the specialist were compared to the list of missing children, leading to the assumption that it was Terry Lynn Hollis. Due to the stress experienced, the girl's parents couldn't participate in the identification of the body, and her brother was too young. Therefore, it was decided to involve Terry's uncle, Herbert Pierce, in the procedure, who arrived at the morgue and confirmed the police's suspicions. 2 days after the body was found, the phone rang in the Hollis family's home. The voice on the other end of the line openly mocked Terry's fate and claimed to know more about the circumstances of the crime than others. Realizing they might be dealing with a real killer, Ronald and Shirley immediately contacted the detective in charge of the investigation. On the same day, a listening device was installed on the phone in the family's home, with 2 police officers attached to it. The calculation was that the anonymous caller would want to provide more details and call again. This tactic bore fruit. As a result of 2 more calls, the anonymous person was identified and arrested on November 30th. It turned out to be a 16-year-old teenager from a neighboring town. Seeing a TV report about Terry Lynn, he came up with nothing better than to prank the victim's parents on behalf of the real killer. The police did not appreciate the joke, and the mediocre humorist found himself in the precinct for a while, where he was actively interrogated. However, the seemingly promising lead turned out to be empty. The boy had no connection to the crime. Without making any progress in the investigation, by the end of December 1972, the police department offered a reward for information leading to the arrest of Terry Hollis's killer. By the evening of the next day, the hotline received 14 messages, but upon thorough examination, they all turned out to be unsubstantial. Nearly 1.5 years later, in the neighboring city of Gardena, a 29-year-old local resident was arrested on charges of molesting a minor. He was questioned regarding Terry Lynn's case as well. The man adamantly refused to admit his guilt, but the case went to trial. During the trial, his lawyer managed to prove the suspect's innocence in the murder. He was only convicted of molesting a 10-year-old boy. Terry Lynn Hollis's case was suspended in April 1974. In 2000, the cold case unit reached Terry's case. The DNA sample of the suspected murderer was sent to the Los Angeles County Crime Lab for analysis and comparison. It took a long 6 years before the conclusion came that the sample did not match any in the criminal database. In 2018, it was decided to test the DNA for familial matches, and luck awaited the investigators. A private research laboratory in Florida was able to match the sample from the case with the Brown family. Through communication with the potential killer's relatives, the police learned his name, Jake Edward Brown. At the time of Terry Lynn's disappearance, he was 36 years old. Jake, who many knew as Thomas Tracy Burham, was arrested in Los Angeles in April 1973 for molesting a minor. This was just 6 months after Terry Lynn's murder. In 1974, he was arrested again for a similar offense, this time in Alameda County. In addition to his unhealthy attraction to children, the repeat offender had convictions for robbery and drug possession. It was impossible to interrogate Brown himself, as he had died several years earlier. In 2019, investigators flew to Arizona, where he was buried, to conduct an exhumation procedure. The bones of the repeat offender were sent to the laboratory. The investigation concluded with a stunning result. The likelihood of an error in comparison was estimated at 1 in 21 septillion. In a septillion, there are 24 zeros. It took the Torrance police almost half a century to determine who was responsible for Terry Lynn Hollis's murder. By this time, her parents were no longer alive, but her brother Randy was able to attend the press conference dedicated to closing the case and, together with detectives, put an end to it. I just wish our parents were alive to see this. We lost a lot back then. On Thanksgiving, I always allow myself some solitude to remember Terry, Randy said. He also urged family members of victims who died as a result of unsolved crimes not to lose hope of finding the truth.